Hey everyone, welcome to our series, The Best of Both. There are times in life we need to choose either or, but there are also complex, delicate times where either or won't do. We need the best of both. Jesus shows us a way to live wisely and well in all of the complexities of life, and we want to embrace both sides of all the good God has in mind for us. So, we're going to dig in this week as we launch our series, The Best of Both. Listen, we're stepping into a new series. So we're actually going to run for the next several weeks that has everything to do with this idea called polarities, which is a fancy way of saying two things that seem opposite and opposed to each other, but are actually, you need the very best of both. In a world where we're constantly asked to choose either or, there are times we need to live more wisely than that, where we actually need the best of both things. We don't want to give up the good of either thing. And so we're going to talk about how to manage that, but to get us started, we thought we'd put some people in some tight spots to choose between two great things. Check this out.
Life throws polarities at us all the time, two things that feel like they're complete opposites, and it feels like we have to choose between the two, and it's a tough choice. So that's exactly what we're going to force people to do today. Choose one, you never get the other thing.
Okay.
Sweet or spicy?
Oh no.
Spicy.
Why?
I don't like sweet things.
No sweet things in general? Like you're already living that way?
No, sweet. Because if everything was spicy, then I would always need water.
No spicy for the rest of your life?
No spicy for the rest of life.
Okay, that might affect your next answer, guacamole or salsa?
Oh,
Rest of your life.
That was a trap. That's a trap.
Oh, salsa. Guacamole's terrible.
Oh, wow. Okay. All right. Hot takes. What if I'm making you choose between indoors and outdoors for the rest of your life?
Indoors. I need climate control.
Okay.
Outdoors.
So you're living in the mountains.
Yes, I'm a mountain woman.
Driving way too fast or way too slow?
Way too fast.
Are you already driving that way?
Well, I'm getting a little older, so I guess driving slow, you know?
For the rest of your life, do you want it to be way too planned out or way too unpredictable?
Way too planned out.
Okay.
I think. I just don't want to know when I'm going to die.
I really didn't see the question going that direction.
Man, it's crazy. My wife tells me it's too planned out, man. I gotta go here at this time, so everything's planned out.
So you're already there. That's already happening.
Already.
No surprises, no nothing.
No surprises, man.
All right,
I don't even
all
like
right.
presents, man. So it's like
No presents?
I don't like presents. You know,
Hold on, we're about
give
to
you-
make this whole video about a different thing. No
You know-
presents? Family time or solo time?
What part of my family?
That's your choice.
Both.
But I can't choose both. Do you want to choose between these two things?
No, I'd rather not have to choose.
It's what we need both, right? Like family time and solo time. Do you want to choose one?
You don't, but you realize that you need both.
If I can't have both, that's not a life that's lived to its fullest.
Yeah.
So,
Especially when it comes to sweet foods versus spicy foods, most of all.
particularly, yeah.
It's great.
Listen, let's be honest. There are times to choose either or. If you are faced to choose between the Las Vegas Golden Knights and anyone else, there's a clear choice, right? There are times that either or matters, but it's not all the time. That certainly can't be always true. There are times in life we absolutely need the best of both. In fact, I thought I'd give you a chance to play along. Find someone around you to play this with really quickly. You're just gonna choose one of two things and tell them on the count of three which one you would choose. If you had to choose for the rest of your life, only one or the other, inhaling or exhaling, tell them right now. Either way you choose, it's a short experiment. All right, let's play one more time. How about this? If you could only have everything be completely consistent and the same, or be everything changing all the time, which one would you choose? Tell them. Oh, a lot of consistency. Or maybe it just took longer to say and that's why I heard it, I don't know. Research would say most people lean on that side, but let's be honest, we need the best of both of those. Right? When you lean too hard on one side, you lose all the good of the other. We have natural preferences, of course. Some of us want consistency, some of us want change, but no one can deny we always actually need both. right? One more, here it is. Would you choose for the rest of your life activity or rest? Go. Some of you are like, I'm very tired today. Rest sounds awesome. But I got a couple friends going through some things right now where they have to stay still and rest. And let me just tell you, they are hungry for some activity. And there are some others who are like running hard and like going fast, and they could just die for some rest. Oh man, we can't afford either or. We need the best of both. And to live wisely, we cannot settle for the complexities of life being boiled down to either or all the time. We experienced this in massive ways through the course of the pandemic. Politically, people were polarized in ways like never before around issues of race, around issues of health, around issues of government control versus independent choice. So many things. And listen, while all have tendencies and preferences in those ways, there's beauty on both sides. There's essential combinations at different times in different ways that we actually need the best of both. Right? How many times would you say one thing and everybody assumed that you meant all the things that group of people meant? And you're pushed to one side, and we don't need to be either or people. We can be the best of both. The question, which is better or which is more important, is not always the most helpful question. There's a better question, a wiser question, and I want to show it to you. If you have your Bibles, go to Ecclesiastes chapter 3. This is in the Old Testament. If you can find your way, if you have a paper Bible, if you can find your way to Psalms, you just need to hang a right for 2 books. That's all you need. If you have an app, Ecclesiastes, you need to spell the whole thing, just ECC will get you where you need to go. If you don't have a Bible, there's a QR code on the back of the seats. You can just scan that. There's a link right to a Bible app or our sermon notes or teaching notes where you can find the scriptures that we use. You can screenshot, follow along, all those kinds of things. There was a man who, God asked him, I will give you anything that you want. What would you like? And Solomon, a just genius response, says, God, I want to be wise. I want wisdom. He could have asked for just about anything, and unless he contradicted God's character, God was gonna say yes. And God gave him amazing wisdom. In fact, people who totally disagreed with his worldview and theology acknowledged him as the wisest person alive. A couple of the books of the Bible are written by him, a book called Proverbs and this book called Ecclesiastes. Now, he lived a kind of life with no limit of resources, no limit of power, no limit of opportunity. He could do just about anything that he wanted. And so actually what he set out to do later in life was to figure out what is the meaning of life. And he looked in every category. He looked in pleasure. He looked in accomplishment. He looked in accumulation. He looked in notoriety and fame. He looked in all kinds of areas. And if you want a feel-good read this week, Ecclesiastes is not your book. His opening line and one of his closing lines is this: meaningless, meaningless, everything is meaningless, a chasing after the wind. What he means is, if you look for meaning in life without God, what you will find is meaningless, meaningless, a chasing after the wind. His systematic approach just kind of helps reveal us. But he has a number of things he says along the way as he's reflected across life that really help us. And the idea behind this and the book of Proverbs is that we would live skillfully, wisely, to think well and live in the complexities of life really well. And a passage that's gonna help us is Ecclesiastes chapter 3. This may ring a bell for some of you who've heard it along the way. There are places this kind of passage is read. I just wanna read it to you, Ecclesiastes 3, verses 1 through 8. It says, for everything there is a season, a time for every activity under heaven, a time to be born and a time to die, a time to plant and a time to harvest, a time to kill and a time to heal, a time to tear down and a time to build up, a time to cry and a time to laugh, a time to grieve and a time to dance, a time to scatter stones and a time to gather stones, a time to embrace and a time to turn away, a time to search and a time to quit searching, a time to keep and time to throw away, both a time to tear and a time to mend, a time to be quiet and a time to speak, a time to love and a time to hate, a time for war and a time for peace. Now, in case you missed my emphasis, that passage was not full of either ors. It was full of both ands. This is a passage full of and. Things that seem like opposed to one another, but often we need the very best of both. Imagine for just a minute a life that was only characterized by plant or harvest. That's it. No, that's one season long. That lasts about as long as inhale or exhale, right? We need the best of both. The question is not which one is most important. The question is revealed in what he said. There is a time for everything. In the complexities of life, we need to acknowledge, what time is it? What is needed now? What kind of tension and blend of two things might we need along the way? Or what kind of rhythm of both things might we need along the way in this case? Here's another, a time to cry and a time to laugh. Listen, imagine having to choose one or the other. All of us have our bents, but we know how unsatisfying people who try to over positive and gloss over the real hurts of life. That's just not helpful. On the flip side, people who only live in the burden and heaviness of life, which is real, but only dwell there and don't experience joy and release from that. Man, you're losing something without the best of both. We need both. This passage is a passage of and. He goes on, a time to grieve and a time to dance. Same idea, right? A time to keep and a time to throw away. How many of you are familiar with Marie Kondo? Anyone? A number of years ago, she wrote a pretty compelling book around tidying up, and then she had a Netflix series for a little season. And the idea was you would pick up every single object in your house and ask yourself, does this spark joy? And if it doesn't spark joy, then you thank it for what it has done in your life, and then you discard it, right? And if it does, then she had this whole process of putting everything just right in its place, which is kind of nice because sometimes we need to tidy some things up, right? There's a time to keep and a time to throw away. I don't know if you watched the news, but about a year ago, she had a child. And so while tidying up is a very good value to live, so is maintaining your sanity. And so she has dialed back a little bit all of this high value of tidying up. We need both. Do we need to tidy up? Yes. Does everything need to be tidy all the time? Probably not, right? Everyone will be miserable if that's the case. Right? And some of you are like, disagree. It's fine. A time to be quiet and a time to speak. Parents of toddlers, can I get an amen? Go to sleep, please. My ears need a break. No, there is a time to be quiet and a time to speak. There are times, we know this, where we wished we would have said something, or we wish we hadn't said something, right? Both of these things. There's a time to just rest in these. Listen, life is complicated, and this is exactly what he goes on to say in Ecclesiastes 3, verses 9 through 11. If you just follow your way forward, what he says is this. That's not the right, oh yeah, it is. Here it is. Wait, what do people get for all of their hard work? I have seen the burden God has placed on all of us. Listen, what he's saying is life is hard. It's challenging. The world in which we live is not simple. It's not easy, right? Can I just get a soulful Listen, that's just how it is. It's not simple. We want it to be, but it's not. Sometimes it's complex. It's challenging. It's hard to know the right thing. He goes on and he points out another one of these polarities. He says, yet God has made everything beautiful for its own time. He has planted eternity in the hearts of humans. But even so, people cannot see the whole scope of God's work from beginning to end. What he's saying is we have a desire to aspire to things, to dream of things, to imagine better futures. Some of you, starting from nothing, imagined a business that would make people's lives better and employees' lives better, and you built those. Some of you imagined relationships that would thrive and bring joy, and you would build a family, and that has happened and come about around you. We have this capacity to imagine into the future and dream and work in that direction. And that's good. At the same time, we have to acknowledge we don't know what the future holds. If 2020 taught us anything, is you don't always see it coming, right? It's both. We need that polarity. Life is just not that simple. He goes on and living in this tension, he says this. He says, so I concluded, people should eat and drink and enjoy the fruits of their labor, for these are gifts from God. Saying, soak up now. Enjoy the good God has provided now. In acknowledgement and in honor of him, enjoy. Be here. Then he also says, and I know whatever God does is final. Nothing can be added to it or taken from it. God's purpose is that people should fear him. Not be afraid of him like he's gonna fly off the handle. Fear like reverence and awe, acknowledging who he is, what he says in his place and his role in who we are, right? And so listen, he's saying, should we just enjoy life or should we honor and acknowledge God? Which one? Both. There are people all over the place trying to suck the marrow out of life, like just get every ounce of what's going on in this moment. But there's something deeply missing on the other side, how fleeting that becomes because there's no acknowledgement of a God who's carrying them, loves them, honors them, has more in mind for them. On the flip side, there are people who are always only about God's honor, which is doable, but they do it in such a miserable, sad way. It's like, oh my goodness, I don't want to follow a God who makes people act like that. It's not either or. We get to enjoy the good that God brings deeply in honor of who he is. We need the best of both. What Solomon is saying is that life is complex. And while there are some times to choose either or, for example, if we have to choose between right or wrong, which should you choose? Let's try to choose right. We don't always get it right, but let's try to choose right? Seems like a good idea. We don't need the best of both. We don't need the best of right and wrong. We need as much of right as we can get. Good or evil, which would you choose? Let's try to choose good. Paul, a follower of Jesus, said this, I am here to please God and not man. We should not try to please people. We should try to please God, which sometimes pleases people and sometimes it does not. But in the interest of living in that direction, we need to choose that way. Jesus said it this way. He said, listen, you cannot serve two gods. You will choose to follow one and hate the other or vice versa. And he says, vice versa. I said that. That's not how that's said. Vice versa. Now I'm in my head. It doesn't matter. You cannot serve both God and money. There is one throne in the center of your life and your heart, and God says, I should be on it for the best for you and for all the things. This is what should happen. And this is the kind of people that we want to be. Too many times things try to sneak up there. It should be either or. It is God or something less. We don't want something less. We want God in the center of who we are. If we have to choose between God's way and the world's way, we choose God's way. Yes, either or is important. But once we make that choice, there are still complexities downhill of that. There are still tensions that we need to live in. Not every problem is an either or problem to be solved or one to prioritize over the other. The question is, how do we get the best of both? In fact, often, either or is a trap. Either or gets us stuck. Either or is a way we find our way into losing a lot of the good God has in mind for us. Like as much as the world wants us to choose one political bent or another, the moment we write off all of these amazing humans on the other side who we happen to disagree with, we lose a lot of good. If we choose one gender over the other as if one is more important or more value, we lose all the good and beauty that God has put in the other. We cannot afford, we do not want to lose the good. In fact, the beauty of polarities is that when these two good things are appropriately honored and held in tension, a better way forward comes about. The best of both starts to resonate and find our way forward. Jesus was often had to navagate these kind of tensions as well. In fact, over the next several weeks, we'll look at some of the ways he navigated these. But I want to show you a couple really quickly. 2 different times people tried to trap him, and they used an either or question, at least 2 times. If you have your Bible, go to Matthew chapter 22. In Matthew chapter 22, there's actually 3 traps set for Jesus. Only one of them is an either or. 3 different traps where they try to get him to make choices that would be bad. If you're not familiar with the life of Jesus, essentially, over time as he taught and healed and served and loved people and invited people into life with God, he gained more and more notoriety. But the people who had religious power at the time, they didn't like that. They didn't want him to have influence or power. I know in our world, people love to share influence and authority, but back then, people didn't love to do that. And so they wanted to trap Jesus and get him off the scene. And so they tried to do this a couple times. In Matthew chapter 22, verse 15, this is one of the traps that was set. Then the Pharisees, who were like the religious people of influence at the time, they met together and to plot how to trap Jesus into saying something for which he could be arrested. Listen, I just want to say, in our culture, isn't there a lot of times that, man, once you say something, you're trapped? And it just feels like, oh my goodness, I don't even know if I can say anything. Jesus can relate. They sent some of their disciples along with the supporters of Herod to meet with him, and they start by flattering him. Teacher, they said, we know how honest you are. You teach the way of God truthfully. You are impartial and don't play favorites. And here's the trap. Now tell us what you think about this. Is it right to pay taxes to Caesar or not? Now, I don't know if you're familiar with any dicey political questions in your life, but this is a dicey political question in Jesus' life. Rome had occupied all of this area where God's people had lived. In the place of Israel and Palestine, there were people who had followed God for centuries upon centuries. Rome had come in recently and taken over power. They were demanding taxes. They were occupying the land. They were the clear authority, and if you stepped out of line, you would be struck down. But in the context of that, Jesus was introducing to a long history of people who had followed God, that he and what he would do were the culmination, the arrival of all that God had promised. And so he's living in this tension of two groups, Romans and Jewish people. And so these people say, let's put it right on the line. Are you gonna pay taxes or not? Are you gonna acknowledge these occupiers and say that it's okay for them to be here by offering them taxes? Or are you gonna say we shouldn't pay taxes because as soon as you do, we're gonna go to Rome and you will be arrested for a lack of loyalty, right? He's trapped, either or, either or, either or. Now, Jesus is a genius. You should read the life of Jesus, even if you don't want to follow him. He was a genius. He was wisdom incarnate, right? He is so wise. He steps right into this and he just says, hey, why don't you show me a coin? They hand him a coin and he says, whose picture's on that coin? They said, well, that's Caesar, the emperor at the time. That's Caesar's picture. He says, oh, okay. We'll give to Caesar what is Caesar's. And the implication was, give to God what is God's, right? Genius. Either or is a trap he wasn't biting. John chapter 8 is actually another brilliant passage. You should check this one out. Tell somebody next to you, John 8. Oh my gosh, you wanna see the character of Jesus? John 8. There's this woman who is objectified to a point in so many different ways. She is used as an object only to trap Jesus. In fact, she was probably baited into this trap. And what happens is she is caught in the act of adultery. She is dragged out from that place and thrown down on the ground in front of Jesus and in front of all the people who saw the scene as this woman was dragged out and thrown on the ground in front of him. These religious leaders, these same ones who wanted to trap him, it says this in John chapter 8, verse 5. It says, the law of Moses says to stone her. The law of Moses was the long history of God's people. Jesus, surely you have to do what God said. You got to do what God said. We got you trapped. And they say, what do you say? They were trying to trap him into saying something that he could use against him, but Jesus stooped down and wrote in the dust with his finger. What did Jesus say as soon as they asked the question? Nothing. We should probably take notes. When an either or presents itself, maybe a pause is actually the best next step. Maybe quiet reflection. Why Jesus did this, I don't know, but he did pause. They were trying to trap him, and so he stooped down and just drew in the dirt. They kept demanding an answer, and doesn't that feel like the world in which we live? Where do you stand? What's your opinion? Or things get urgent, and we feel like we need to choose either or. But he says, no. So he stood up, and this is what he said. Remember I said Jesus was a genius, right? He says, all right, we'll do what God's law says, but let's do it this way. Let the one who has never sinned throw the first stone. Mic drop. Actually, rock drop. All of them just dropped their rocks and walked off. That was a really lame church joke. You laughed too hard at that. Genius. He was forced to choose between the value of this woman's life or honoring God's law, and he says, we need the best of both. Certainly, he looked at this woman after everyone left, and he said, go and sin no more. Did he address the brokenness in this woman's life? Yes, he did. Did it cost her her life? No, it didn't. And followers of Jesus, that's our story, isn't it? Did he address the brokenness in our lives? Yes, he did. Right? And did he make a way forward for us to be different? Yes, he does. This is who he is. Complex problems made simple by either or simply won't satisfy. They will not lead to all the good that God has in mind for us because the thing on both sides is actually essential. As soon as you choose one, you lose all the good of the other. In fact, the two things on both sides actually make the other one better often. Jesus was not to be trapped, neither was Solomon, and I just want to say to all of us, we want to become the kind of people who are like them, who live wisely, who honor God and enjoy him, who embrace consistency and change, who live skillfully and wisely in a way that invite people to follow God into the same kind of life. In fact, really what we're gonna do, not just today, but for the next several weeks, is try to put on like some lenses, right? If we've been seeing life blurry, just drop some contacts in that just help us see with a different kind of clarity, that we don't just get baited into either or all the time, but know when the right time is to say, wait a minute, this is a polarity. We actually need to manage a tension, not solve a problem. We need to live in the best of both of these things. And so we'll start today with like how to actually see some of these, but each week we're gonna break out a specific one and look particularly at what God has to say about how we live in honor and enjoyment of Him in each one of these. Let me give you a few examples. There are some within our own lives. One of them I've already mentioned earlier, activity and rest. God has a way for us to live in the beautiful blend of both, not running ourselves ragged and not missing opportunities to live with impact. We need the best of both activity and rest. In the same way, we need to know how to live in the best of both, taking care of others and taking care of ourselves. All of us have this bent in our lives, right? And there's a lot in our culture right now about self-care and self-love and all these other things. Like, yes, but not just that, right? We need the impact and like Jesus was not all about self-love. Did He practice self-care? Absolutely. But did He pour Himself out on behalf of others? Yes. We don't need either or. We need the best of both, right? These are the kind of tensions that we want to navigate in our lives. Making a plan or being flexible. Which one should we do? Both. We need both. Because even though God has set eternity in the hearts of men, we cannot fathom what He is gonna do. We don't always know what's ahead. We need to be able to like set a course and adjust as we listen to the Spirit with one another. God invites us to live this way. We need to live wisely in these things. Are you noticing that to live in the tension of these things is gonna be a little harder than just choosing one or the other? Are you noticing that tension isn't always like a desirable sense in our lives? How many of you let's just do this. Tell the person next to you on the scale of 1 to 10, how much do you love tension? You all right? Decide a number. I'm just thinking about that woman on the video who said, which part of my family? Scale of 1 to 10, how much do you love tension? Tell the person next to you right now, go. All right, in earshot, I'm gonna put the average at about 3.2, okay? Not a lot of love for tension. But here's the thing, this is where we actually grow. This is where we actually embrace the complexities of life. I was talking with my wife earlier this morning, and she was talking about it just kind of reminds me of a kite. You need just the right amount of pull on both ends to have a really great time. If there's no tension, it just flies away. If there's no wind to pull it away from you, it's not gonna fly. It's totally disappointing. Listen, and that blend is not a bad picture of what we're going after. And it's not just tensions in our own lives, it's tension between our lives. So we'll spend a number of weeks talking about these. We need to show up in the lives of others with the best of both grace and truth. Now think about yourself for just a minute. Are you a person bent more on grace, like, I'll be patient, I can understand, I have compassion, I have empathy, it's okay, right? Which is all good, right? None of that's critical. Grace is essential. On the other side is truth. You are like gonna tell them how it is and it's coming fast and hot. Or even just within you, there's a sense of justice. You're just like, that's not right. There's a right way. We need to choose what's right. Can you tell both of those things are essential? They feel like they're against each other, but they are not. In fact, the scripture says Jesus came full, not of grace or truth, but of grace and truth. In fact, the beauty of these two things is that when you get the best of both, they make each other better. That when you can show up with just the right amount of honesty and clarity, but with just a beautiful blend of empathy and compassion and being with people, not against people, the possibilities on the other side of the best of both are so good. But if you flip into grace only, it's all empowerment and eventually disempowerment and just getting stuck. And on the other side, if you just land on truth, you get all kinds of disagreement, hurt feelings, and distance between people. We need the best of both. The same in terms of being connected to and distinct from. We want to be connected to one another, but distinct from them. I don't want to abandon you when things are hard, but I'm not going to take all of you onto me. We are distinct, but we need to stay together. We got to live in that tension. That's hard to know how to navigate. Or this one is tricky too, compassion and justice. Which one do we need more of in the world? Everyone's going to have an answer. But listen, if you just run one way or the other, you lose so many important things. And there are things in our world that are not right. But if we try to fix those without compassion, oh my goodness, that's not a world I want to live in, right? Or a world that's just full of compassion but no justice, not a world we want to live in. We want to live wisely and in God's way in each one of these things. It's what we're going to explore for the next several weeks. So all I've said is there's these lenses. Don't see everything and don't let the world make us see everything in an either or way. Sometimes we need the best of both. And so let me just give you a really quick model to start looking for this, and then we'll dive in deep on a few of these starting next week. Here's the quick model. I don't know if you have had kids in your life, whether nieces, nephews, younger siblings, kids, grandkids, where you read a book and as a picture shows up in the book, you push a button and it makes a sound. Have you ever seen these books? You're reading along and here comes a picture and they push the thing and Mickey makes a noise or something like that, right? Okay, so we're just gonna play that kind of game here for the next few minutes. When I say the word snap, I just want you to snap. Can you just try right now? When I say snap, okay, good, because here's the thing. I said good, it was really mediocre. Do you need a few practices? Let's try it. When I say snap, okay, good. I just want you to remember this simple little acronym. I borrowed this and adapted this a little bit from a guy named Barry Johnson who has all kinds of brilliant business things to say about polarity management. He uses a process called the small process, but I just thought I'd shrink it a little bit. We're gonna call it the snap. Hey, look at you. On it process, okay? So here's what it means. SNAP stands, by the way, how many of you are channeling Zoolander right now? Oh, snap! Anybody? No, just me? Okay, cool, that's fine. Here's what it stands for. It means to see, first of all, to see that this is a polarity. This is not an either or time, right? We need to be able to see when this is true. It's not always true, but it might be true more than we've thought. The next one in SNAP is, okay, you almost missed it, is to name it. To name what you're experiencing and look for the other side. The third is to assess, where are you at in it and what are you experiencing in this polarity? And finally, to partner with somebody, particularly with someone who has the other bent, right? If you're all grace, you need a truth partner, right? Or if you're all truth, you need a grace partner to try to pull this thing together. So let me walk through it real quick. Here it is, SNAP. First one is to see, and here's what I want to say. If you are experiencing this, one of the ways to see a polarity is to ask the question, is the good that you're offering other people just not leading to what you thought? Are you dissatisfied? You've offered so much grace and you're just gonna pour on more and more grace and here's some more grace and why aren't you getting it? There's nothing wrong with grace. Grace is good, right? Why isn't grace helping? When you experience that kind of frustration or dissatisfaction, when you are doing your best in God's direction, maybe you actually need to see that there's something on the other side, that it needs its indestructible pair to bring the best of both things together. Where in your life are you just pouring on good that you know is good and it's not leading to what you feel like it really should lead to? These two essential things, actually, in fact, grace will never be all it's supposed to be without truth. And truth will never be all it's supposed to be without grace. You need both sides, right? So don't fall into either or. The next one in SNAP is to name it, right? To name what's going on. To name the polarity. I'm pouring on grace. I'm being so compassionate. And then to say, wait a minute, okay, now that I'm sensing this isn't working, to try to name the other side, right? Man, everything is changing and I'm just, goodness, I guess I'll change something else and see if that helps. Wait. You're dissatisfied. What might be the other side? What might be the other side of this polarity? Need some consistency to go with this and just the right amount of blend. Different seasons might hold, just like when the wind comes up in a kite or it backs off. Different things are needed at different times. Remember, Solomon said, there's a time for everything. What time is it in this polarity? Name both sides. And then we need to assess. What is our bent? What is our natural inclination? To ask ourselves, where do we naturally lean, right? And then to say, okay, listen, what downsides am I experiencing? I talked with a parent earlier this week who's really grace-oriented and has a million great reasons, especially in this season, to think that grace is what's needed right now. But as things start to escape away and stuff is making into people's lives that they don't really want to be a part of their lives, it's just oh, I gotta reach for some truth. I'm overexpressing this good thing and I need a little bit more of this. Who can help you? Who could support you? Who could bring you in? So what downsides are you experiencing? Right? Change fatigue or consistency boredom. You need some of the other side. Or what upsides am I missing? Things are so consistent. I just would love to see something new, right? We can see this kind of polarity managed. And finally, we need a partner in this. God never intended us to follow him alone. We do not find our way into wise living alone. Who can we explore and live this tension well with? This is what I mean by SNAP. See, name, assess, and partner. It's just some lenses. Start looking through this week. I always mention this. When you go car shopping and you have a model in mind, what do you start to see on the roads everywhere? That car, right? You see what you're looking for. And so SNAP is supposed to help you see the polarities, and we're gonna explore some really deeply in weeks to come. Andy Stanley calls living in these polarities living in the messy middle, and doesn't that actually sound like real life? It's not either or. We don't need to run back and forth, penduluming back and forth, getting too much of one and then sprinting in the other direction until we get all the downsides, and then running back in the other way until we get all the downsides, and ping pong our life back and forth. What we want to do is just the right amount of pull on the kite string, just embracing the tension in just the right way. We need this in our own lives. How many of you, does this sound like something that's going to help you live and parent and relate with others well? Listen, we just found so much traction in learning to navigate these and embrace these. And honestly, our culture needs people who live like this, because it feels like our culture thinks we should have diversity or unity. And we actually need the very best of both. It sounds like we need this or that all the time, that we need red or blue, that we need this solution or that solution. And honestly, it sells media and it sells product. It just doesn't actually work in the complexities of life. People who live in the messy middle of navigating, not giving up any good on either side, but wisely following God's way. These are the kind of people we want to become. God will help us do that. That's what we're after. Polarities are not problems to be solved. They are tensions to be managed, but it requires wisdom. So I thought as we finish our teaching time, we should just ask God, who is the source of all wisdom. In fact, James, Jesus' half-brother, said it this way: if any of you lacks wisdom. So can I just ask you, does anyone lack wisdom? You're either nodding your head or you lack wisdom. If any of you lacks wisdom, you should ask God, who gives generously, without fault finding. He'll show you the way forward. We want to pursue God with his people, with his Spirit, through his word, to live wisely. And so why don't we just take a minute, and I'm just going to give you a moment of quiet, because there's a time to speak and a time to be quiet, yeah? And in your own way, for just a few minutes, just ask God for wisdom. Maybe even a specific area of your life. Ask for wisdom. And then I'll pray on our behalf. And so God, you say to ask, and so we do. Would you make us wise, that we might enjoy you more and more deeply and honor you more and more highly in every way in which we live. May we support one another really, really well. May we listen to you really, really clearly. May we have grace for ourselves just like you've had for us, but never stop pursuing wise living in your direction. In Jesus' name, amen.
So this week, let's keep our eyes open. Let's see, name, assess, and partner with others in this viewing life to see the best of both come about. Each time God is inviting us to embrace things in tension. We're going to need one another along the way, and so if we can support you in any way, we'd love to. Head over to canyonridge.org. You'll find everything you need to know along with a way to get in touch with us. If this was helpful to you, I encourage you, share it with a friend, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button. We'll see you soon.